everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Liana. Today I'm going to be doing a review on Dragon Quest XI Echoes in an Elusive Age. I don't have a physical copy here with me. I have downloaded it on my PS4 and I've been playing it digitally. I can throw up a photo of it on the screen so you know what it looks like. So the publisher of this game is Square Enix, or Square Enix, depending on what you prefer. It was released in July 2017 on the 3DS, and subsequently it was released in September of this year on PS4 and PC. There is a Nintendo Switch version that's supposed to be coming, but it's not out yet. It's rated teen for crude humor, fantasy violence, mild blood, simulated gambling, suggestive themes, and use of alcohol. And so I'm going to try not to get into too many spoilers if I can avoid it. But just in case that happens, here's your warning. The story is set in the world of Erdrea. This is a vast and magical land, and of course, fictional. The protagonist of the game is seen at the start as a little baby. His parents are trying to keep him safe as invaders come to their kingdom. They're trying to kill everyone, including the king and queen. They die protecting him, but the hero of the game, who is the baby, he floats down river and he comes across an elderly man named Chalky, and he takes the baby in and raises him in a little village called Cobblestone. So then as we flash forward a few minutes later, our hero has grown into a young man, and he's been living a nice, peaceful life in the village of Cobblestone. He's made many friends, and he's grown up there with his adoptive grandfather as well as his mother. It's discovered that he has a birthmark on his hand that is the mark of the legendary hero called the Luminary. And this Luminary fought an evil darkness that plagued the land many years ago and is threatening to plague the land once more. So he must travel to the center of Erdrea and find the great tree of life, Yggdrasil, or Yggdrasil. This means that you're going to be traveling throughout the land, meeting new people, fighting a whole bunch of monsters, as one typically does in JRPGs. That's the basic plot. When it comes to gameplay, this is a very classic turn-based RPG, so you'll just you'll have all the time in the world to make decisions in combat. When it's your turn, you can choose from an array of different options in the menu in order to attack your enemy. So that's attacks, spells, abilities. You can defend, you can run away, you can change your tactics for your party members. So you can change it so that all of them are on the same tactics, or each one is kind of playing a little bit differently. You can take control of them manually, or you can set it up so that each one is behaving a little bit differently. There are also special skills called pep powers. These require your party members to be pepped up. You'll know when that happens because this great blue lightning sort of surrounds your character, and therefore it grants them special sort of traits. Some of them have a boost to their critical hits, some of them have better strength, some of them have better magical abilities, so on and so forth. And then when two or more people are pepped up, you usually have certain abilities that the two of them combined can use together. Characters all have different skill trees, so as you level up through battle, you'll earn skill points that you can put towards your skill trees. And so let's say you have the main character, he can kind of go towards broadswords, single-handed swords. He has his luminary path, and he has his sword mastery. And so each section has a number of different ways that you can go to get different skills, and they kind of meet in the middle. And these skill trees advance even further throughout the game. I still don't have much of a voice today. It's kind of going in and out. And additionally, when you unlock certain skill panels, you'll find different combinations of pet powers that you can use in battle. There are a total of 8 different playable characters in this game, although you'll only have 7 characters at any given time unless you're in the post game. And, you know, not everybody's going to want to play the post game stuff. I understand that. So let's just say 7 characters at any given time. And you can only have 4 characters on the battlefield at once. So you can swap them in and out. It kind of depends on who you're swapping in to battle, whether or not your turn is forfeit. So let's say you want to swap out the next person over, that's fine. That's not going to forfeit your turn. But if you're swapping out the person whose turn it is, then your turn will be lost. I feel like some of the characters may be spoilers, so I'm not going to really tell you who you end up recruiting, although you may already know if you've played the game or if you've read ahead online. There are 2 battle cameras available for you. There's classic mode and freeform. There's no difference in the actual battle. It's not going to affect the battle, it's just going to affect the camera. So the classic camera is just that. If you've ever played an RPG that's turn-based, the camera is going to focus on the character whose turn it is. It's so as you make your decision, it'll focus on them. As you attack, it's going to follow it through to the person you're attacking. And it'll do that with the enemy as well. It'll follow the enemy through to your side of the team. With freeform, it zooms the camera out. You have the ability to use the stick to roam around, though that has no bearing on whether the enemy can or cannot attack you. They will still attack you, no matter your position on the field. And you also have complete control of the camera, though again, this has no bearing on anything. I personally liked the feel of the freeform camera because I was able to see things a lot better, and the classic camera jumped back and forth so quickly at such an alarming rate that it honestly messed with my head quite a bit. I do have issues with dizziness and vertigo, and certain games can trigger that for me, so I preferred the freeform. So in all of the environments, except for dungeons, you can go on foot or by horseback. In some fields, including dungeons, you can also mount certain enemies. You'll know which ones these are because they're glittering gold. All you have to do is defeat that enemy and they will become mountable. Now, because Westerners are incredibly impatient, they've implemented a dash button. You hold down R2 and you can get to where you need to go a lot faster. So they didn't have this in Japan when it was initially released. This was only for this part of the world. And it's not without its problems, because I've found quite often throughout the game the map couldn't keep up. It needed to buffer. And although it wouldn't take that long, like I said, it was frequent. So I would be dashing around any map, whether it was a small map or a big map, using R2 to dash, and all of a sudden the little hourglass would appear and map loading, because it's like it just didn't count on the fact that I would be moving that quickly. So that's a little bit of an issue. I don't know if maybe it's better on a PS4 Pro. I have a regular PS4. Actually, I have a PS4 Slim, I believe. But yeah, that's a little bit of an issue. So I feel like if they had the knowledge that they were going to implement that for Western audiences, then they should also have perhaps worked on the frame rate a little bit. Now, on the largest map, the world map, you can travel by boat or by air. You can also fast travel using the zoom spell, which I really appreciate the fact that this doesn't cost any MP. Usually in games you have to spend at least a little bit, like maybe between 2 and 6 MP. I usually try to keep the cost low, but this is 0, which is awesome, so you can just keep going wherever you want. Don't have to worry. And the zoom function works for getting back to wherever you've been before. So as long as you have visited that place, including campsites, you can go back to there. This does, there are problems with this later in the game, but I'll talk about that later. It won't allow you to travel to smaller areas where there are no campsites, such as some of the dungeons or smaller islands. So that's one thing to take into consideration. You'll have to go there by boat. The air travel is kind of strange to me. Now, usually in games like this, you get your boat and you can get to a lot of new places, and then you get the air travel, and that's usually even better. In this, I found that the air travel was pretty useless. You can only land in a few choice places. The selection of places that you can land when you're traveling on Cetacea it's so limited, and that makes no sense to me, because usually you get your air travel and you can travel absolutely anywhere. You can land absolutely anywhere, including places you'd never been able to go to before. But that's just not the way it works here. There might be a few places you couldn't travel to before that you can only get to by air, but the majority of places you're not going to be able to reach by air. You're going to have to travel by foot or by boat. And I feel like that really sucks. I would like to have one function that can carry me wherever I go, but that's just me. That's just me. All over the map there are some sparkly spots, little blue sparkly spots, and you can farm those for crafting materials. So these are really handy. You can check your map to identify where these points are. They'll be marked off as little question marks at first because you won't know what these materials are at these given points. But as soon as you go up to that sparkly spot, it will be marked off on your map what it is. And you can go back to that spot later and find the exact same material. So let's say you find a recipe and you really want to craft something, but you are in need of gold ore. Well, then you go into the menu, you go into the materials list, you select gold ore, and it will give you a list of all the different areas where you can find it. And you will be able to go back to that at any point in the game, and it will be guaranteed to be there. So that's awesome, because in a lot of games you'll be searching and searching and searching for materials. It's more randomized, and it's not random at all here. It's guaranteed, and that's awesome. For the actual crafting process, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to insert a little bit of a video so you can see how that works, because me explaining it and not showing you, I'm probably going to sound like it's really complicated. So you get your little fun size forge around the first boss of the game, so not that long into the game. You gather recipe books. These are little red books found on bookshelves. They're also found in chests, and they're also found as rewards for completing certain quests. So you gather materials you need from around the map. Certain monsters also drop them. When you have everything you need, you can forge whatever you want, from weapons to accessories. Then you start to forge or bash. Bashing fills up the different forging meters, and your goal is to get each of them into the marked gauge, preferably as close to the arrow as possible. You can use a regular bash or other skills you acquire as you level up your forging abilities, which is done every time you gain levels in battle. However, these skills take up focus, and you only have a certain amount of focus per forge. If you run out, you won't be able to complete your forge. The regular bash takes up the least amount of focus, and of course, special skills take up more. Leveling up will increase your focus, allowing you to use more skills and forge higher level equipment. The temperature of your forge will also affect your bashes, so as soon as you learn more skills, you can control the temperature and help your forging. Depending on how well you do, you can end up with regular gear or +1, +2, or +3 gear. You can appraise your work before you decide to finish, which will give you an idea of what you're going to get. So if it says pretty well, it's going to be regular. Really well, you know, you're going to get +2, and brilliant means it's going to be perfect, +3. As far as the difficulty of the game, I didn't realize that there were these things called draconian modifiers at the start, so I ended up playing just on normal difficulty. I can only speak to my experience playing this game on normal, but I found that it was a fairly average game. It wasn't that hard, it wasn't that easy. I did find enemy scaling to be kind of strange. So I would go through areas and find that the enemies were pretty decently difficult. And then the next area, which should be more advanced, they were far below me. Everything was running from me. So it was very odd in that respect to just be kind of going up and down, up and down, up and down. There was no smooth, steady climb. And I'm accustomed to the idea that each new area brings a new set of challenges, not being all over the place. I can say that I never reached game over and almost had never need for items, as my magic was more than sufficient. So the modifiers probably would have been good in my case. At this time, I do want to talk a little bit more about the story and the characters in depth, because I only really briefly touched on that at the start. This game takes a fairly basic story premise and adds some nice twists and turns here and there throughout. There's a slight time travel aspect and is used in smaller quantities so as not to become convoluted. There are moments throughout the game that hit you a bit harder than what you'd think, because of the way that they write the characters and the story. It becomes quite effective and emotional. And because the game does have you believing that things are a certain way and then they turn out to be another, that is given to greater impact for the overall story. The voice acting is great, though I wish that they did have a dual audio option. From what I understand, though, it is only voice acted in English. There wasn't any voice acting in Japan. I think it was just here. So I can understand why that would be. The characters are really well written and charming. I cared about all of them, and because the stakes are genuinely high, I felt that something bad could happen to any of them at any time. And at one point, something does. The game makes a very bold choice in one area, which is a rare form of storytelling in JRPGs, I find. However, if you do stick around for the post-game, that is kind of undone a bit. The relationships of these characters in terms of who they are and what they mean to each other is actually quite interesting. There's a lot of good development throughout the story and in terms of that. I do have one complaint when it comes to a character and how they were written, and it is Sylvando. As with most JRPGs outside of, say, the Persona series, they never speculate over his sexuality at all, but it is less than ambiguous. He is very stereotyped. You could argue that he is an entertainer and thus he is very flamboyant. But he is followed around by a team of very young and by the game standards, very cute young men, parading around him, acting in an equally flamboyant manner. He is also friends with a ship captain named David, who literally wears like a pink gimp suit, which is a choice. So why this bothers me is pretty simple. They never intended to actually have a gay character in the game, so instead they made a stereotyped representation of one. That isn't to say there are no flamboyant gay men or straight men. It's the execution and the intent behind this character. He's legitimately the only main character who has zero reason for being in the game. Everyone has a clear purpose and link to the hero, the luminary. Sylvando wants to be a traveling entertainer, that's it. And let's say hypothetically they did intend for him to be gay, then it's no better because now he's tokenized. He has no other reason to be there except for him being the gay character. He's not an entirely useless character in terms of playability, but he was my least used character in battle and often outlived his usefulness as other better characters were added into the party. Any positives about Sylvando often played second fiddle to the overt laziness of the writers playing him off as a big gay clown. Literally, he is a circus entertainer. Now, the story itself, I think, is extremely strong, but there comes a time where it just takes far too long for the plot to unfold for the player. I played this game, the main campaign, not post-game, for a total of 107 hours before defeating it. By the time we've reached the mighty Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life, we think the game is nearing its close. This is not the case. This is merely the halfway point, which means there's another 50 plus hours of game to go. I'm not saying the second act was pointless, far from it. There are many great story moments beyond this point that are great and very necessary. The issue is how long it takes for each plot point to happen. For example, at the beginning of Act 2, all of your party members are gone. So are all of your fast travel points. You don't recover either for many hours later. This puts a huge downer on continuing the game during the first part of the second act as you travel alone, on foot, everywhere you go. I wanted to keep going and regain my party, but it felt like the game was preventing me from doing this every step of the way. It would tell me to go to one part of the world, only for him to tell me, no, actually, we meant for you to go all the way across this way, and then all the way across this way, and it would just throw me in a huge circle. This was very tedious, and indeed any fun I was having up until that point was just kind of lost. Maybe that was part of the point, to make me feel utterly defeated, kind of like the main character, but there must have been a better way to do this. When I finally regained the majority of my party, things started getting better. But I feel at this point the game was still far too long. If they had wanted to keep things going after the events of the World Tree, and I think that was a good idea, they needed to make things more concise. Cutting about 15 to 20 hours off of the game would have kept all the necessary story elements that they had needed without giving the player an unnecessary amount of runaround in the second half. Keep in mind that there's an entire third act of the story in post-game, and this third act is the real end to the game. So in order for people to want to continue their journey with these characters for so long and get that separate true ending, you have to keep everything nice and tight. My final gripe with the game is this. It's very simple. I understand the importance of making this game feel like a classic RPG, but the save point system is horrible. You can only save in churches and at campsites. For a 100+ hour game, this means save spots are incredibly scarce. The final dungeon is a few hours in length, with the only save spot being at the very start. Now granted, every time you reach a new level, they give you a slightly quicker way to get back down, but let's say you make it all the way to the final door, to the final boss, it's going to take you still quite a few minutes to trek all the way back down to the beginning. Having some different save points, say like one per floor, is a nice modern touch that gamers are really going to appreciate. In summation, Dragon Quest XI is a game with an overall strong story and mostly well-written characters. The gameplay and graphics are solid with very few hiccups. Crafting elements are easy but fun, offering up a multitude of custom options. The game presents a charming and colorful atmosphere with cute enemies and really pretty environments. There's a truly vast amount of gameplay to be had from this title. Those who love classic RPGs are going to enjoy this game. The downside, of course, is that it takes its homage to classic RPGs a little too seriously, with its supremely rigid save system and music that's a little too repetitive. Additionally, the story could have benefited from quite a bit of editing in order to tighten everything up. Kind of like this review. So those are my thoughts on Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age. If you've played the game, please let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear from you. I post Mondays and Fridays here in this channel on the afternoons Eastern time, and I hope to see you next time. Bye everyone.